Hello class. Today we're going to be looking at compound inequalities, and we're going to be looking at the notes EI2D, page 27. So for our compound inequalities, that would be two or more inequalities joined together. For the purposes of this class, we're really only going to be getting into two. And when we're looking at compound inequalities, we need to decide, are those two inequalities being joined together using and or or? If we're looking at and, that would mean both inequalities have to be true at the same exact time. If or, we could have where either inequality can be true. So here, looking at the next problem set, write the inequalities that would describe the following graphs. In this first one, this is what we had been learning. I would have -1 as my critical number. Because my shading is greater than -1, I want my x values, which represent my shading, to be greater than or equal to -1, and the equal to comes from the fact that my circle is filled in. In my second problem, again, filled in circle, shaded to the right, so x is greater than or equal to my critical number, which is -10. In my third problem set, or in my third problem here, I have x is less than or equal to 5, because my shading is to the left or smaller than my 5. Again, my x is going to represent what my shading is showing. So x is less than or equal to 5. And for this one, again, this is simply reviewing what we've done before. X is less than or equal to 7 because I have my circle filled in. Well, if I combine these two above in an and statement, where are they both true at the same time, where the x is greater than or equal to -1, and where is the x less than or equal to 5, if I combine these two, I get everything in between them, where are they both true at the same time, where is x greater than -1 and x is less than 5. And that would be this graph down here. And that is represented by -1 is less than x, or I could read that from my variable, which is our best representation of what's happening in the shading, that x is greater than or equal to -1, which puts us to the right of -1, and x is less than or equal to 5, which puts us to the left of the 5. Where are those both true is just in between. I don't want anything over here because any of the shading to the left of -1 is not going to be, anything to the left of -1 is not going to be true for this one up here. And anything to the right of 5 is not going to be true down here. So the only time where both of these top two shaded graphs are true is in between, where they are both true. So looking at the same thing for my two over here, where are they both true? Where is x greater than or equal to -10 and x is less than or equal to -7 is again in between, so that's represented by this inequality, which gives us -10 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to -7, or reading that from my variable, again, which is a better representation of what my shading shows, x is bigger than -10 and x is smaller than -7, will put me in between, my x value in between those two. So now we want to write these compound inequalities on our own. So the first one, I get that x is between 3 and 8. So x is bigger than or equal to 3 and x is less than or equal to 8 gives me this inequality. So what does that look like for this one over here? Well, we would want our critical numbers to be -6 and -2. I want just a less than symbol for the first one because there's no filled in circle here, and I want a less than or equal to for the second one. So again, no filled in circle means I do not want the line underneath. The filled in circle means I do. So for this one, I again want my critical numbers on here. I'm not going to have any underlining because neither one of my circles are filled in, and I just want x to be in the middle. And again, we can double check that my inequalities are going the correct direction by just reading from my variable. X is bigger than 7 is true. I'm to the right of 7. And x is less than 9, which is true. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video, try number 4 on your own, and I will show you the answer in a minute. And so I get 15 is less than or equal to x is less than 22. And these are my AND statements. Or statements we just write as two inequalities separate, so we're not necessarily going to practice those in this particular video because we already have tons of times. But AND is a lot different than what we've done so far. So I want to write the inequality that represents the statement below. So the set of all numbers greater than or equal to -2, and that should clue us into the fact that we are going to have this combined statement like this, and less than or equal to 3. So we get x is greater than or equal to -2, and x is less than or equal to 3, writing this as a combined statement. I want you to go ahead and try question number 6 on your own, and I will show you the answer here shortly. Again, we have x is greater than or equal to 0, and x is less than 4, reading from my variable. It's really important that we get in the habit of thinking about this as reading from my variable, both for inequalities that are a little bit simpler and are more complex inequalities. So writing a verbal statement for this inequality, again, I want to read from my variable. So x is greater than or equal to 4, and x is less than or equal to 11. So I want you to go ahead and try the next one on your own, and then I will put the answer on the screen. Again, reading from my variable, x is greater than or equal to -1, and x is less than or equal to 3. This time they just wrote them as two separate inequalities, but they mean the same thing. As if my x had been, we could write it as if all of this was just one x in the middle. So the next question is asking me to graph the compound inequality. So I'm going to want a filled in circle at 6, an open circle at 8, and because I want my x to be bigger than 6 but smaller than 8, I'm going to want to shade in the middle. Alright, so again, filled in circle at 6, open circle at 8, and everything filled in between so that my x, my shading, is bigger than 6 but smaller than 8. I want you to go ahead and try these next few all on your own. I am going to go over these in our Google Meet to give us some problems to work with while we are together. Let's go ahead and look at number 16 though. In this inequality, I don't just have a x by itself like I do in all of these other inequalities. So I need to get it by itself. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So if I add 9 to both sides, -3 and a +9 are opposite signs, so I want to find their difference and assign the sign of the bigger number. So the bigger digit rather is 9. So I want to assign the value of my 9, which is positive. So here I have reading from my variable, x is less than or equal to 6. I want to graph this with a closed circle and shading to the left because x is going to be less than. So again, closed circle shaded to the left, and that is reviewing what we have been working on with a single inequality as our result. So for our next problem number 17, we are going to be looking at trying to determine whether or not these inequalities are going to be true or false. So I can do that by graphing. So in this inequality, I want to graph my -6 to the left because it is going to be the smallest or the most negative of my two values. So -6 is a smaller value than -2, so it goes on the left. And then I'm going to use open circles because I don't have any equal to underneath my inequalities. And now here's the part where I need to decide, can I be both greater than -6 and less than -2? Well, greater than -6 is going to be this direction. X is greater than -6, and x less than -2 is going to be this direction. So where those two are both true, where x is greater than -6 and x is less than -2 is going to be right here in the middle. So yes, I would say that this is correct. Let's go ahead and get this next one graphed. So starting out, I want to put the 4 on the left and the 5 on the right. I'm going to have x less than 4 would be heading off into this direction, and x greater than 5 would be heading off into this direction. So we can see that if this is an and, which it needs to be because it's all one statement like this, these two things cannot happen at the same time. If we review, and means both inequalities must be true at the same time. So looking at this, I cannot have this and this happen at the same time. They don't have any overlap. So this one would be incorrect. Go ahead and try the last one on your own, and I will show you the solution here momentarily. So looking at this, the -4 is the smallest value, 3 is the biggest value, x greater than or equal, or sorry, x greater than -4 would be to the right, and x less than or equal to 3 would be to the left, and those do overlap. Where those are both true would be in between, so this again would be correct. So there are varying ways to write these inequalities. I don't have to have what we were looking at earlier, where my smallest value is to the left and I have both less than signs or less than and or equal to. But to me, this is a lot easier to read if I do put my smallest value to the left and just use less than or less than equal to signs than trying to do something like this. You can still get correct inequalities. There is just a greater chance of making mistakes, in my opinion, but I can get correct statements out of this. So if I wanted to start with my bigger value, I needed to, and I wanted my correct inequality as an and statement, I needed big greater than signs in between here. So we're going to talk about number 18 during our Google Meet. Solve each compound inequality and graph the solution. Here, x is not by itself. So in order to solve these, I have to split up my inequalities. So I'm going to write my -2 less than x plus 2 as one inequality, and then I'm going to have x plus 2 less than or equal to 4 as another inequality. Just like up here, where was it? Number 8, where I said this would be the same thing as getting rid of all of this and just replacing it with a single x in between. I can also split my inequality starting with here with a combined inequality and split it into two separate inequalities where that middle part is repeated for both inequalities. So that's what I've done here, is split this up into two inequalities where I had this portion over here, and then this portion over here. So I'm going to go ahead and solve each inequality first by subtracting 2 from both sides of this inequality and then subtracting 2 from both sides of this inequality. So then once those are solved, I get -4 as my critical value over here and a +2 as my critical value over here. Because I have the equal sign, this is going to be a filled in circle, no equal sign, an open circle. So let's go ahead and see what these two look like. So I want x to be greater than -4 is going to be to the right, and x less than or equal to 2 is going to be to the left. So I do want to shade in the middle, and because this is an and statement, that will be correct. Now we're going to go ahead and save the rest of these for our conversation during our Google Meet. If you have any questions, just make sure you write them down or circle them and then ask me during our Google Meet. Have a great afternoon.